I am an ink bottle from 1840 that people used to use to hold ink for writing. While writing, people would pour their ink in me to dip their quills or dip pens in. Generic bottles like this one were created just to carry ink and sometimes to get refills at the store. There were also other more expensive ink wells made for the upper class to display on their desks. I was mainly used by white people in the 1840s as most slaves could not read or write. Almost all ages used me, as long as they were literate, because I was essential to writing anything. People of the lower classes would have still used me, but not the decorative ones. They would only use the more cheaply made ones. I was made in the U.S. in a glass house in New England. During the early 19th century, workers used the method of blowing glass to create bottles. As of 1840, there were no glass houses east of the Mississippi, so most of the craftsmen were in the Northeast. Beginning in the 19th century, I started to become common in the Western world, because ink was now starting to be sold as a liquid instead of powder that would need to be mixed with water. A century later, the ballpoint pen was invented and I grew out of use. By buying me, it showed that someone had at least some education because they were able to write. Depending on the style of the ink bottle, it could showcase the amount of money someone had. I was popular in the U.S. during the Civil War when racial tensions were extremely high in the country. I played an important part in all kinds of correspondences, in war, in the White House, and in spreading opinions around. Originally, users would dip their quills in the ink and use that to write, but quills didn't last very long, so the steel nib was invented in the late 1800s. Now, they could still dip it in ink, but they wouldn't have to buy a new quill after a week. After the semi-automatic bottle-making machine was invented in the late 1800s, I was able to be made much more easily before I was replaced by the ballpoint pen. Overall, I was significant during this time period because of the way that I was used to write. By writing, slaves could gain knowledge and become more independent. I was used to write up military plans and to draft treaties. Without me, history could have been very different.